Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadameyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamascha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Rughunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamascha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai, thank you everybody for joining. And just like every time, I will repeat myself. Please do turn on your cameras. It's nice to see the audience. But yeah, thank you, Roy Prabhu. Thank you, Gunamai Mataji. Okay, I shall share my screen. And any volunteers to read? Sarika Mataji?
39. Overview of Chapter 9.18. King Yayāti Regains His Youth. Shukdev Goswami said, O King Parikshit, as the embodied soul has 6 senses, King Nahusha had 6 sons, named Yati, Yayati, Samyati, Ayati, Vyati, and Kriti. When one enters the post of king or head of the government, one cannot understand the meaning of self-realization. Knowing this, Yati, the eldest son of Nahusha, did not accept the power to rule, although it was offered by his father. Because Nahusha, the father of Yayati, molested Indra's wife Shachi, who then complained to Agastya and other Brahmanas, these saintly Brahmanas cursed Nahusha to fall from heavenly planets and be degraded to the status of a python. Consequently, Yayati became the king. King Yayati had 4 younger brothers, whom he allowed to rule the 4 directions. Yayati himself married Devyani, the daughter of Shukracharya, and Sarmishtha, the daughter of Vrishaparva, and ruled the entire earth. Maharaj Parikshit said, Shukracharya was a very powerful Brahmana and Maharaj Yayati was a Kshatriya. Therefore, I am curious to know how there occurred this Pratiloma marriage between a Kshatriya and a Brahmana. Shukdev Goswami said, one day, Vrishaparva's daughter, Sharmishtha, who was innocent but angry by nature, was walking with Devyani, the daughter of Shukracharya, and with thousands of friends in the palace garden. The garden was full of lotuses and trees of flowers and fruits, and was inhabited by sweetly singing birds and bumblebees. When the young lotus-eyed girls came to the bank of a reservoir of water, they wanted to enjoy by bathing. Thus, they left their clothing on the bank and began sporting, throwing water on one another. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hemi Mataji?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. While sporting in the water, the girls suddenly saw Lord Shiva passing by seated on the back of his bull with his wife, Parvati. Ashamed because they were naked, the girls quickly got out of the water and covered themselves with their garments. Sharmishta unknowingly put Devyani's dress on her own body, thus angering Devyani, who then spoke as follows: Oh, just see the activities of this servant maid, Sharmishta. Disregarding all etiquette, she has put on my dress, just like a dog snatching clarified butter meant for use in a sacrifice. We are among the qualified Brahmanas who are accepted as the face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahmanas have created the entire universe by their austerity, and they always keep the absolute truth within the core of their hearts. They have directed the path of good fortune, the path of Vedic civilization, because they are the only worshipable objects within this world. They are they are offered prayers and worshipped even by the great demigods, the directors of the various planets, and even by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, the Supreme Purifier, the husband of the Goddess of Fortune. And we are even more respectable because we are in the dynasty of Brigu. Yet, although this woman's father, being among the demons, is our disciple, she has put on my dress exactly like a Shudra taking charge of Vedic knowledge. Shukadev Goswami said, when thus rebuked in cruel words, Sharmishta was very angry, breathing heavily like a serpent and biting her lower lip with her teeth, she spoke to the daughter of Shukracharya as follows: You beggar, since you don't understand your position, you should why should you unnecessarily talk so much? Don't all of you wait at our house depending on us for your livelihood like crows? Using such unkind words, Sarmishta rebuked Devyani, the daughter of Shukracharya. In anger, she took away Devyani's garments and threw Devyani into a well. After throwing Devyani into the well, Shamishta went home. Meanwhile, King Yayati, while engaged in a hunting excursion, went to the well to drink water and by chance saw Devyani. Seeing Devyani naked in the well, King Yayati immediately gave her his upper cloth. Being very kind to her, he caught her hand with his own and lifted her out. With words saturated with love and affection, Devyani said to the king, Yayati, O great hero, O king, conqueror of the cities of your enemies, by accepting my hand, you have accepted me as your married wife. Let me not be touched by others, for our relationship as husband and wife has been made possible by providence, not by any human being. Because of falling in the well, I met you. Indeed, this has been arranged by providence. After I cursed Kacha, the son of the learned scholar Braspati, he cursed me by saying that I would not have a Brahmana for a husband. Therefore, O mighty armed one, there is no possibility of my becoming the wife of a Brahmana. Shukadev Goswami continued, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it because it was arranged by providence and because Prabhuji, can you move? He was attracted by Devyani's beauty, he accepted her request. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Kirani Mataji.
Thereafter, when the learned king returned to his palace, Devyani returned home crying and told her father Shukracharya about all that had happened because of Sarmishta. She told how she had been thrown into the well but was saved by the king. As Shukracharya listened to what had happened to Devyani, his mind was very much aggrieved, condemning the profession of priesthood and praising the profession of Ancha Vritti, collecting grains from the fields. He left home with his daughter. King Vrishaparva understood that Shukracharya was coming to chastise or curse him. Consequently, before Shukracharya came to his house, Vrishparva went out and fell down in the street at the feet of his guru and satisfied him, checking his wrath. The powerful Shukracharya was angry for a few minutes, but upon being satisfied, he said to Vrishparva, "My dear king, kindly fulfill the desire of Devyani, for she is my daughter, and in this world I cannot give her up or neglect her." After hearing Shukracharya's request, Vrishaparva agreed to fulfill Devayani's desire and he awaited her words. Devayani then expressed her desire as follows. Whenever I marry by the order of my father, my friend Sarmishta must go with me as my maid servant along with her friends. Vrishaparva wisely thought that Shukracharya's displeasure would bring danger and that his pleasure would bring material gain. Therefore, he carried out Shukracharya's order and served him like a slave. He gave his daughter Sarmishta to Devyani, and Sarmishta served Devyani like a slave along with thousands of other women. Can I continue, Prabhuji?
I think Gunamai wanted to read, and then we can wrap around.
Hare Krishna, Hare.
Hare Krishna. Gunamai Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Vrishaparva wisely thought that she read. When Sukracharya gave Devyani in marriage to Yayati, he had Sarmishta go with her, but he warned the king, "My dear king, never allow this girl Sarmishta to lie with you in your bed." O King Parikshit, upon seeing Devyani with a nice son, Sarmishta once approached King Yayati at the appropriate time for conception. In a secluded place, she requested the king, the husband of her friend Devyani, to enable her to have a son also. When Princess Sarmishta begged King Yayati for a son, the king was certainly aware of the principles of religion, and therefore he agreed to fulfill her desire. Although he remembered the warning of Shukracharya, he thought of this union as the desire of the Supreme, and thus he had sex with Sarmishta. Devyani gave birth to Yadu and Turvasu, and Sarmishta gave birth to Druhyu, Anu, and Puru. When the proud Devyani understood from outside sources that Sarmishta was pregnant by her husband, she was frenzied with anger. Thus, she departed for her father's house. King Yayati, who was very lusty, followed his wife, caught her, and tried to appease her by speaking pleasing words and massaging her feet. But he could not satisfy her by any means. Sukracharya was extremely angry. "You untruthful fool, lusting after women, you have done a great wrong," he said. "I therefore curse you to be attacked and disfigured by old age and invalidity." King Yayati said, O learned, worshipable Brahmana, I have not yet satisfied my lusty desire with your daughter. Sukracharya then replied, "You may exchange your old age with someone who will agree to transfer his youth to you." When Yayati received this benediction from Sukracharya, he requested his eldest son, "My dear son Yadu, please give me your youth in exchange for my old age and invalidity. My dear son, I am not yet satisfied in my sexual desires, but if you are kind to me, you can take the old age given by your maternal grandfather, and I may take your youth so that I may enjoy life for a few more years." Yadu replied, "My dear father, you have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man, but I do not welcome your old age and invalidity, for unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation." O Maharaj Parikshit, Yayati similarly requested his sons Turvasa, Druhyu, and Anu to exchange their youth for his old age. But because they were unaware of religious principles, they thought that their flickering youth was eternal, and therefore they refused to carry out their father's order. King Yayati then requested Puru, who was younger than these three brothers, but more qualified. "My dear son, do not be disobedient like your elder brothers, for that is not your duty." Prabhuji, just keep going.
Yeah, anybody else like to read? Or Kirani Mataji, would you like to finish off?
Yes, Prabhuji. Puru replied, "O your majesty, who in this world can repay his debt to his father? By the mercy of one's father, one gets the human form of life, which can enable one to become an associate of the Supreme Lord. A son who acts by anticipating what his father wants him to do is first class. One who acts upon receiving his father's order is second class, and one who executes his father's order irreverently is third class. But a son who refuses his father's order is like his father's too. Shukracharya, Sukadeva Goswami said, in this way, O Maharaj Parikshit, the son named Puru was very pleased to accept the old age of his father, Yayāti, who took the youth of his son and enjoyed his material world as he required. Thereafter, King Yayāti became the ruler of the entire world, consisting of 7 islands, and ruled the citizens exactly like a father. Because he had taken the youth of his son, his senses were unimpaired, and he enjoyed as much material happiness as he desired. In secluded places, engaging her mind, boards, body, and various paraphernalia, Devyani, the dear wife of Maharaja Yayāti, always brought her husband the greatest possible transcendental bliss. King Yayāti performed various sacrifices in which he offered abundant gifts to the Brahmanas to satisfy the Supreme Lord, Hari, who is the reservoir of all demigods and the object of all Vedic knowledge. The Supreme Lord, Vasudeva, who created the cosmic manifestation, exhibits himself as all-pervading, like the sky that holds clouds. And when the creation is annihilated, everything enters into the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, and varieties are no longer manifested. Without material desires, Maharaja Yayāti worshipped the Supreme Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart as Narayana and is invisible to material eyes, although existing everywhere. Although Maharaja Yayāti was the king of the entire world and he engaged his mind and 5 senses in enjoying material possessions for 1000 years, he was unable to be satisfied. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Jai Hare Krishna. Thank you for everyone reading. So, everybody knows my style, so I'm going to ask the first question. We start off this pastime with which personality?
Nahush.
Nahush. So, who is Nahush and where does he come from? Why are we talking about Nahush?
Prabhuji, there was this yajna, I forgot, where, sorry, the names are very difficult. So he actually, Indra's pastime with Vritasur. So it starts from there. And when that, when after Vritasur, he apparently before the pastime of Vritasur, he is engaging this Brahmana to actually do sacrifice on his behalf because he has got the Brahmati dosha. I forgot the names. It's kind of, and then because he was he understood that this person was doing oblation both for the devas and the asuras, so he cut his head off, and then so he's off from the position of Indra, and in his place Nahusha is being made Indra in the heaven.
Okay, so this pastime with Yayāti, these 2 chapters that we read this week and next week, they're actually very multi-layered, yeah? Because it's interesting, like, as Gurumaya Mataji mentioned, right? This pastime goes all the way back to the pastime that she's mentioning is in Canto 6. We're in Canto 9 now, and this pastime she's mentioning is in Canto 6. But even immediately, if we look at it, then yes, it starts with Nahusha, right? But we also, if we look at the start of Canto 9, right, the first chapter of Canto 9, we get the introduction to the dynasty of the moon, right, through Pururava, right, who's the father, right, with grandfather. I'll check in a second. But in chapter 1, we see Pururava's birth, basically, through Sudyumna, and I won't go through pastime because it's a very intricate, interesting pastime in itself, and Buddha, right? Buddha is the son of the moon. And the story in very brief, I guess, is that Sudyumna had a very interesting sort of birth. He was born actually as a female and then got transformed into a male. But then there's a pastime that we've read somewhere else in the Bhagavatam where there's a forest that Shiva and Parvati are enjoying in. And in historic times, before this pastime, some sages had come into that forest and seen Parvati and Shiva enjoying. So Parvati, being a woman, she's very chaste. She's like, embarrassed about the situation. And as a result, Shiva then allows Parvati to basically go, okay, any male who enters this forest will become a female. Now here's Sudyumna, who was born a female, got transformed into a male, and now comes into this forest and gets transformed back into a female. Right? But Vishishta, who is like the family priest, he sees this position and he doesn't like it. So he prays to Shiva, and Shiva goes, okay, because of the special request, Sudyumna can be a female for 1 month and a male for the next. Female, male, female, male. That way he can rule the kingdom, but also have his, fulfill the so-called curse on the land that he gave because of Parvati, right? So he met Vashishta's request, but he also upheld his, what he promised to Parvati about everybody transforming to a female. But then we don't hear much about this moon dynasty until chapter 14, right? Which is where the pastime actually comes up. And it starts off in chapter 14, verse 1, where Shukadeva Goswami says, Athashuyatam Rajan Vamshaso Masya Pavanaha, right? He's saying to Pariksha Maharaj that throughout this whole Bhagavatam, I've spoken to you about the dynasty of the sun, right? The dynasty of the Surya Dev. But now I'm going to talk about the dynasty of the moon, right? Somasya. Why? Because it's glorious, because it's a purifying dynasty, right? And specifically in the second half of that verse, he says, Yasmin eladayo bhupa kritayantya punya kritaya. He says that this description mentions kings like Aila, right? Which is Pururava, actually, of whom it's glorious to hear about. Okay, so just like the Sun dynasty that we've heard about throughout the Bhagavatam, the Moon dynasty also has very amazing personalities, amazing pastimes related to the Lord. And there's something even more special about the dynasty of the Moon, right? Now, some of you on the call will probably know what that is, right? That hopefully, when we go through the personalities in this chapter, it will come up. I'm not going to take the answers, Rashnamatani. Because it's let's keep it as a cliffhanger for those. Maybe through this chapter we'll find out, people understand what it is, but yeah. Okay, so second. So Subhara Prabhu, did you say Drishtatyumna born? No, this is Sudyumna. It's a different personality, actually. Yeah. But if I'm not mistaken, Drishtatyumna was born. So Drishtatyumna's past life was in a different, a different body. Yeah. Sudyumna. Yeah. Sudyumna. It's in Canto 9, Chapter 1. If you wanted to go through it. So. Then in chapter 14 we hear about the pastime with Pururava, and specifically we hear about his birth and then his attraction towards Urvashi. Actually, Urvashi was attracted towards Pradyumna, and then they had a relationship, right? And through that relationship they had 6 sons, and we start to go through these in chapter 15 and 16, so just before these chapters. Right, so we start going through Lord Parshuram, who's one of the descendants of one of the sons, and then in chapter 17 we go through 4 of Ayu's sons, 4 of them, and then in chapter 18 we go through the 5th son of Ayu, who's Nahusha. And with that introduction, right, Shukadeva Goswami explains, like we read in this chapter, that Nahusha was molested Indra's wife, right? And this is the pastime that Gunamai Mataji is actually kind of went to. So it starts off in Canto 6, where Indra is actually performing a penance. He's actually hiding from all the sinful reactions that he accrued from killing a Brahman, actually. And he's in the Sarovar River, actually. Yeah, Manasa Sarovar Lake. He's hiding in there for 1,000 years to save himself from sinful reactions. And during that time, Agni Dev would come to try and give him food, but Agni Dev is coming with a fiery nature, and his, a lake which is watery. Agni Dev couldn't enter, So Indra was actually starving throughout that time as well for 1,000 years, and during that time, Nahusha would be the one who looked after Indra's post. If I just read the translation of Canto 6, chapter 13, verse 16, so 6:13-16. As long as King Indra lived in the water wrapped in the stem of the lotus, Nahusha was equipped with the ability to rule the heavenly kingdom due to his knowledge, austerity, and mystic power. Nahusha, however, blinded and maddened by power and opulence, made undesirable proposals to Indra's wife with a desire to enjoy her. Thus, Nahusha was cursed by a Brahmana and later became a snake. Right? So Nahusha was qualified, right? In the, I guess, corporate world, we have this idea that if we're going on leave or if we're sick, we depute somebody, right? We get somebody else to fill our position for a short period of time. That's what happened with Nahusha and Indra. But what happened is that Nahusha thought, I'm fulfilling this post of Sarika Mataji for such a long time. I am qualified to take everything that Sarika Mataji has. Sarika Mataji's family is mine, children are mine, the house is mine, everything is mine. So I can do whatever Sarika Mataji was allowed to do. So Nahusha thought he could do that with Indra's family, with Indra's wife. But the Brahmanas didn't like it. And so the Brahmanas basically, what did they do? They cut his envious serpent-like mentality by just turning him into a snake. Because it's actually envy, right? If we think about it, if I'm fulfilling somebody else's position temporarily, but then I'm taking, okay, this is so wonderful. I want to keep all of this. I want to use it for my benefit. It's quite envious. And who's the most envious creature that we know? A snake. So the Brahmanas punished him by giving him the body of that envious nature that he had. And like this, we can see that Yayāti is actually one of my favorite pastimes, by the way. And there's two reasons for that. One is originally when I started serving, I joined Bhajasundar Prabhu's classes last year. It was a teacher training class. And Yayāti's pastime, one of the verses, is the one that I was assigned first to prepare a class for. But also, when you go through the pastime, it goes through practically everything that you want, about the whole material nature versus spiritual nature, about it touches different areas of the Bhagavatam because of all the different personalities involved. It's such a nice pastime, but Bhagavatam is like that. I was thinking about this a couple of days ago. Like, if you look at the most complex material book or movie, right? I don't know many Indian ones, but like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings are like the two most complex ones that I can think of. But even there, 2 years later, the author doesn't come back to a small little segment in the first book that they've written, And these are 12 cantos of Bhagavatam where Vedavyas has compiled it in such a way that we're going in and out of each different pastime, but that pastime comes up two cantos later. And it's like, when we're reading through it end to end, we don't think about it. Right? We just read, okay, Nahusha tried to molest Indra's wife. I wonder why that happened. Okay, read on, right? Because there's nothing that Prabhupada mentions in the purport sometimes. But actually, if we really study the Bhagavatam, if we understand the Bhagavatam, like if you look at many Maharajas, many senior devotees, they would have read the Bhagavatam like 40, 50 times. And so when they come across this pastime in Canto 9, they will know automatically, yes, Nahusha was mentioned in this canto. This is the pastime, just like Gunamai Mataji was able to do, So they'll go through this, they'll actually understand this right off the top of their head. They don't even have to think about it. That's what our aim is, you know, of our absorption in Bhagavatam. Trying to get to a stage where we can link all of the sections of the Bhagavatam together. So anyway, as King Nahusha was basically turned into a python, right? He's no longer able to fulfill his position. Naturally, when a king is no longer able to fulfill his position, whether he's fallen down, whether he's left his body, or he's fallen sick, or something's happened, then, I mean, it still happens nowadays in most places, the most qualified eldest son takes over, right? They take charge of the kingdom now. And that's basically what we tried to see, what we saw, right? Yati was meant to take over the kingdom. Yati was the eldest son. But Yati was like, no, I don't want to get involved with the politics. I want to focus on self-realization. And that's one lesson that we can learn here. Yeah. There's a saying, and Keshav Maharaj always uses this a lot, but there's a saying, it comes from one of the material writers actually. Small minds discuss people. Average minds discuss events. But great minds discuss wisdom. Right? So small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, and great minds discuss wisdom. If we're small-minded, we look at one person and start gossiping about so many different things. If we're average-minded, we attend an event or we hear about something that's gone on in the world, and we start talking about this, that, and the other. Or, you know, in the news it mentioned this, that, you know, this country, they're having this problem, so on and so forth. But great minds think about how can we elevate our lives. They talk about wisdom. And this is what Yati's focus was. His focus was that he wanted to focus his life on what would perfect the human form of life. And we know from the scriptures, we know from the acharyas, from the gurus, from Prabhupada, that Nityam Bhagavata Seva is what the perfection of life is, right? Always reading and studying the scriptures and serving the pure devotees. As devotees, we don't really want to get involved with being small-minded or average-minded. We don't want to get involved with politics. We don't want to get involved with material affairs. We have our swadharma, we have our duties in the world, but we want to absorb ourselves in our Sanatan Dharma as much as we can, but fulfill our Swadharma to whatever capacity is required. But our focus, our internal desire should always be that we want to focus on Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Always trying to absorb ourselves in serving the deities, the scriptures, the devotees, and absorbing ourselves in Nam Seva as well. So because of this, Yati didn't want to take over the kingdom. He don't want to get involved with the politics because he just wanted to focus on Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So naturally what happens? Well, Yayati, who's the second son, became king. And then when Shukadev Goswami starts to just briefly mention about how Yayati marries Devayani, who's the daughter of the most powerful, well, a powerful Brahmana, Shukracharya, then Pariksha Maharaj immediately picks on it and it's like, hang on a second, but Devayani is a daughter of a Brahmana and Yayati is the daughter of a Kshatriya. And this is not a very good marriage in the ancient civilization, right? Why? Because it's considered pratiloma. So pratiloma is basically when you've got a higher caste woman marrying a lower caste male. That's pratiloma, and it's actually looked frowned upon in society, right? And this is Shukracharya. He would of course be very strict on principle. So Pariksha Maharaj is thinking like, how and why did this happen? Like, didn't somebody stop it? This is Shukracharya's daughter. Like, didn't Shukracharya have an objection? So then we go into the pastime, right? And we start the pastime with Devayani and Sharmishta, who are friends, right? So Devayani is the daughter of Shukracharya, a Brahmana, and Sharmishta is the daughter of actually a Kshatriya king, right? But they're very close friends, which is quite natural actually. And then they have all their other friends, right? The bigger society of friends that they have, and they're all just enjoying, you know, typical sort of what friends do, enjoying, sporting. And in this specific case, we hear that they're bathing in the river, in the waters. They're enjoying sports together. But naturally, when you're in the water, you don't go with all your clothes, right? You take some off. And obviously, traditionally, there would still always be some undergarments that people wear. But even then, the chastity, the loyalty, the shyness of women was such that even if somebody as great personality like Shiva would come across, they would feel embarrassed. They'd be like, no, like I'm showing too much of my feminine features. So that's what happened here. And immediately all the girls rushed to get on their clothes. But by mistake, Sharmishta put on the clothes of Devayani. By mistake. And then what happens? Well, I don't know about the Matajis on this call, but I have two sisters. Yeah, I have two sisters. And they're 1 year apart. Yeah. Now they're older, now they're much more mature. But there was a time where I remember one sister would wear even the jewelry of the other sister. And he would like, how dare you? Who told you you could wear my jewelry? Who gave you permission? Right? This is two sisters, yeah? And you can imagine these are two friends, two female friends. There's so much possessiveness over the jewelry and clothing for some reason. I mean, I'm not a female, so I can't comment. I shouldn't comment, but like at least with a lot of, at least I can speak for myself or my friends. It's like, okay, you accidentally wore my watch or whatever. It's like, okay, fine, But here we are, Devyani and Sharmishta. All hell starts breaking loose, right? They get into an argument, actually. They start cursing each other's lineage. There's the pride of the Brahmana daughter, coming from a learned family, coming from a very well-respected scholarly ancestry, right? Shukracharya was a very, very well-respected Brahmana. Versus the pride of a Kshatriya's daughter, whose father was a king. He provided for the entire nation, including the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas wouldn't have their own sort of facilities. The king would provide for them. The Brahmanas would usually beg for food. They would beg for facilities for the family. And the king would heartedly offer charity to them. So here we have the pride of a Brahmana daughter and a pride of a Kshatriya daughter. It's like the clash of titans, We have that saying in the UK, clash of titans. It's two very strong personalities with very strong backing coming together. But in the end, what happens is that it gets dirty, actually, right? It gets dirty between Devyani and Sharmishta. Sharmishta, in the end, takes away all the clothes that Devyani has worn and throws her into a well. So now here we have Sharmishta and all her friends, all her Sakhis, have gone back to the kingdom, and here's Devyani alone in a well, naked. But then we have the typical fairy tale story come up, like your Disney's Cinderella and Prince Charming story. Okay? Prince Charming, in this case Yayāti, comes onto the scene. He sees Cinderella, Devayani, in the well, in a difficult position, in distress. And then, well, the first thing that has to happen is love at first sight, right? Yayāti and Devyani see each other, and Yayāti is like, let me offer my top to you, my upper garment. Right? They wouldn't wear a top like these, they'd just have a cloth covering them. So he's offered his upper garment to Devyani in the well, so that she can cover herself. And then he offers her his hand to pull her out. I mean, that's quite natural, right? If you see somebody stuck, forget the love at first sight part, but it's quite natural. If you see somebody stuck, you're going to offer your hand or whatever you can to try and pull them out. But the pastime is such, this love at first sight, this Disney movie called Cinderella is such that it doesn't just stop with just pulling them out, pulling the person out. Devyani also expands on this love at first sight, right? As soon as she's pulled by Yayati out, she starts talking about how it's actually the will of the Lord. It's actually providence that has brought us together. You've already held my hand once. Now you can't let another person hold my hand. Right? She's considering that actually we're already married, because what happens in Vedic tradition when two people get married, you actually have that rasam, right, where you put hands on top of each other. So she's actually thinking, and she's actually expressing to Yayati that, look, Providence has made us get married already. All that remains is making it formal. And she backs it up with something which is also another mental trip, right? She brings up this curse that she had from Kutch. So Kutch was one of the sons of Brihaspati, right? Who was a learned celestial priest. And the pastime goes that once Kutch had come to Shukracharya to learn one of the arts. The art was called Mrita Sanjeevani. It's the art on how to revive somebody after they've died untimely. So typically it would be used for like warfare, right? So if somebody's kind of at least got their bodily pieces together, and on warfare, people usually die quite untimely because, I mean, it's war. So then you could use this mantra, use this art to then revive them back. And somehow Devyani had become attracted towards him. And so she expressed a desire that I want to, marry you. Will you marry me? Kind of thing. But Kutch was quite principled. He was quite disciplined. His Kutch, who was the son of Brihaspati, but who had come under the shelter of Shukracharya. So Shukracharya was his guru, right? Shiksha guru for that art. And here is Devyani, the daughter of the Shiksha guru. Anybody related to the Shiksha guru or even the guru is considered to be as good as the guru. So you respect them in that same way. So Kutch refused that, look, you're the daughter of my guru. I can't marry my guru's daughter. That's not proper. But we have a sport Brahmana daughter actually, right? And so Devyani got very angry at this and so cursed Kutch to say that what you've learnt just from my father, this art of reviving from the dead, you won't be able to use it when you need it. And so Kutch then counter-curses by saying, okay, you've cursed me like this, you won't be able to marry a Brahmana. Now, if we think of the Pratiloma part that I mentioned, a Brahmana who's considered the highest caste can only marry a Brahmana. A Brahmana daughter can only marry a Brahmana, if we follow the tradition properly. But now here's Devyani being cursed so that she can't marry a Brahmana. So either she stays single or she marries somebody from a lower caste. And so she uses this argument to explain to Yayati that, look, I'm not allowed to marry a Brahmana and you're a Kshatriya. So, another arrangement by Providence that we can and have got married. Now that you've held my hand, we are married and this is allowed, because I'm not allowed to marry a Brahmana. It's ideal for me to not remain single. So you being a Kshatriya, this marriage is done. It's ticked in the heavens and it's stamped by Providence. Now, of course, this is Bhagavatam, right? So we know that all the pastimes of the Lord are actually arranged in such a way for the pastime to continue. But we see, if we reflect on it in this world, we see that boys and girls use this argument so much, This, it was meant to be, We were meant to be together. Love at first sight, we were meant to be together. But then when that being gets tested, even slightly, we were never meant to be. Isn't it? Love at first sight, divorce at first fight. Right? They use so many arguments that, I was distressed and I was thinking, when will I get somebody in my life that would understand me? And then you turned up in my life and you understood me perfectly. And so I think this is arranged, Providence, destiny has arranged for us to be together. But then the first misunderstanding, and it's like, you never understand me. You know, from going from we got together because you understood me perfectly to you never understand me, and then divorce. Right? But historically, if we look at it, then what would be considered? Like the parents would consider like the astrological charts. They would consider the psychophysical nature of the male and female, right, of the husband wife, or the boy and girl before they get married. They'd consider the family. They'd consider so many different things before two people get together. But nowadays, it's, you know, just based on attraction, actually. And this is something that Prabhupada actually quotes from Canto 12. He quotes from Canto 12, chapter 2, verse 3. Dampatya bhrichur hetur. Right? So it's men and women will live together merely because of superficial attraction. Right? Just because of that attractive force, boy and girl think that, yeah, you know, we should live together. We should be together. This is the arrangement. And we see in this case that both Yayati and Devayani are convinced that, yes, you know, our marriage is meant to be. They're both attracted to each other. It sounds like Providence has arranged for them to come together, the curse, then the hand holding and everything, you know, it seems like Providence has arranged everything. And then we have this, I think it probably comes from a very old movie, right? It's Jab Miyan Bibi Razi, To Kya Karega Kazi. Right? I think it's from a movie. I don't know why that came to mind when I was preparing. But yeah, it's true, right? Like when the two parties are together, are ready, then what is anybody else going to do? They can go, no, but he's a Kshatriya, no, Devyani is Shukracharya's daughter. Shukracharya is a very strict, principled person. Like, you know, it won't work out. Like you might feel attracted today, but think about the future. But no, you know, Devyani is not like this. Shukracharya, yeah, but I'm the king. I'll be able to sort Shukracharya out. So many things, you know, there's so many arguments that will come up when somebody's convinced about doing something. You can't stop them from doing it unless they themselves desire to not do it. So then naturally what happens? Now it's the wedding planning that starts, right? And the first step in this wedding planning was to take revenge from the humiliation, right? So Devyani goes back home and she convinces her father Shukracharya that Sharmishta has done such wrong, you have to punish her. Now, Shukracharya is very principled, he's very staunch in nature. But even we see it in this world, the most hard-hearted, most powerful father has the most softest heart and softest nature when it comes to their children. Isn't it? The heart melts, regardless of how hard they are externally for everybody else in the world. The heart melts when it comes to their children. And actually, there's a senior devotee at the manor actually, and he's very learned, he's very scripturally, he's very scholarly. Every time I meet him, I'm always trying to find ways to speak about scripture, to find, like, get knowledge out of him, you know. And once I had the opportunity, because of Prasunda Prabhu actually, to go to his house with Prasunda Prabhu, and I was doing all sorts of wrong things, right? I was misplacing things and so on and so forth. And he was like, no, you know, you don't do this, you do this, you do it like this. He was very principled with me. He was teaching me in one way, which is nice. He considered me close enough to be able to teach me. But it was funny because the very next day, we were at a Sangha together, at a house program, at somebody else's house. And I know his daughter is my god sister, actually. She's only like 15, 16 years old. And I didn't know he was there. I saw her, I saw my god sister, and I didn't know he was there. But then the program was about to start. And what ended up happening is that I went round and then I saw him and I saw his daughter together. And then I was just observing, and his daughter was just playing around with his watch, playing around with the arm, doing all these like wonderful, affectionate sort of things, just like a child would do. But she's 15, 16 years old. And he's not strict with her. He's not like, no, it's not proper, you know, you don't like just stroke the arm of the father like that. He was just letting her do what she wanted. To the outside world, he's staunch, he's very principled. But for the children, he's very forgiving, he's very affectionate. He just lets the children be frivolous with them. You know, and that's what parents usually are. They allow their children to be frivolous with them. Because who else will they go to? So, in the same way, Shukracharya was bought by the affection of Devyani. And so he felt like he had to punish Sharmisha. He had to go to their house and go, what Sharmisha has done is wrong. You need to do something, right? So what punishment is prescribed? Well, Devyani gets to pick the punishment. And the punishment she picks is that she wants Sharmishta and all her friends, all her sakhis, to be dasis, to be maidservants, whenever she gets married. Traditionally speaking, when especially a Kshatriya gets married, then all of these sakhis of the bride go with the bride. And here we have Sharmishta, who's going to go with all her friends, not because Sharmishta got married, but because Devyani required, right? It wasn't a request, it was a demand actually, that Sharmishta comes with her and all of Sharmishta's friends come. So that was check one, right? Get revenge. Your typical Bollywood movie that starts off with some sort of revenge. I guess not typical, but you know, a lot of movies like that. But then the second thing, right? And this is a very subtle thing. Sweet talking the father to make him feel like he's in control of the marriage. It's a very subtle thing that Devyani's done. When she talks about keeping Sharmishta as her maidservant, she uses the words Pitradata yato yasye. Right? It's translated as whoever my father decides to marry me to. Whoever my father decides me to marry to. At the start of the chapter, she had already decided she's going to marry Yayāti. But here she is, whoever my father, Pitradata yato yasye. As parents, generally you know when your child's sweet talking you, right? But you still just buy into it. You just buy into it because it's your children. That happens with my nieces. Like I can't imagine how it would happen with actual children, you know, that like I think everybody on this call, or at least most, would have children or grandchildren even. It's like, you know, they're sweet talking you for that chocolate or for something that they've done wrong so that they don't get punished, but you just buy into it. And that's what happens here. And then the third step, well, there is none because execution is successful. Revenge is there. She gets Sharmishta in the way she wants her. Shukracharya is already convinced about Yayāti, and she sweet-talked him into thinking that he's the one that's arranging for the marriage. And now it's just, you know, the marriage just goes on. But then there's a cherry on top that happens, right? Now, usually when we order cake, you know, we think about the cherry on top of the cake. This is like, if I get the cake, everything is fine. But then you get something better than the cake. It's like, I got the cake and I got something more. And that cherry on top is that Shukracharya warns Yayāti to never let Sharmishta into his bed. Meaning, you are not allowed to have sexual relationships with Sharmishta. That's like a cherry on top for Devyani, right? Because naturally, traditionally, historically, the Kshatriya kings would have many children from the dasis as well as their wife. And Sharmishta was going almost like a dasi. But Devyani got this kind of unrequested boon that her father made Yayāti, like warned Yayāti that you're not allowed to have children from Sharmishta. But then Yayāti comes into a pickle. He's a Kshatriya. And he's approached by Sharmishta to have a child, actually, because Sharmishta, she sees that Devyani's got children. So her feminine, her motherly side comes out, and she wants to have children. And it's actually a Kshatriya's duty to never refuse a qualified woman. Right? And we see there's many pastimes like this in the Bhagavatam. If we go back to like Canto 1, when Arjun's just come back from Dwarka after Krishna's left the planet. Arjun's all morose, he's all sad, he's in depression. And Yudhishthira Maharaj then questions Arjun, like, what happened? Did this happen? Did that happen? So many different things. And one of the things he mentions is Gamyam Vasat Kritam Striyam. Right? Gamyam Vasat Kritam Striyam. He's asking Arjun, were you not able to properly treat a deserving woman? Arjun was also a Kshatriya. Was he not able to fulfill the request of a woman when she asking, and even though she deserved it? It's actually religious for a Kshatriya to provide for a qualified woman. Nowadays, nobody is a proper Kshatriya. Yeah, so those women on this call that are like, are you saying that my husband who's on the call or who's going to listen to this afterwards is like, you're allowed to have multiple wives and multiple children from different wives? No, we're not proper Kshatriyas. Right? But back in the day, there were staunch Kshatriyas. Their focus was on being a Kshatriya. Now we're all mixed. And also there was a need and so on at the time as well, but we won't get into it. And also in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is sex life that is according to religious principles. Right? In chapter 7, I think he mentions that. So Yayāti is like, okay, Providence has arranged this. Right? Providence means that, okay, I'm a Kshatriya, Sharmishta has come to me. I know Shukracharya told me this, but I have to fulfill my Kshatriya duties. So he gave Sharmishta the children. But then shortly afterwards, Devyani finds out. She finds out that Sharmishta has children belonging to Yayāti. And I can probably say that my sisters will also remember the fact that my other sister took jewelry, wore it without asking and anything like that, even now to this day, 10, 15 years on. Of course, Devyani was going to remember that she has this little feud with Sharmishta. And so she becomes furious. And she leaves home to go back to Shukracharya. And the whole time Yayāti is trying to follow her, like, no, please don't go, like begging her almost. But she still makes it. She's relentless. She goes back to Shukracharya. And what happens when Shukracharya finds out? He immediately curses Yayāti to lose his youth and lose his ability to enjoy with his sexual organs. Right? He curses Yayāti with Jara and Viruna Karani, which means that he's attacked and disfigured by old age and invalidity. So now he's an old man suddenly, right? He was enjoying his youth, and now he's all of a sudden an old man, and he can't even engage in any enjoyment activities related to sexual activities. But Yayāti and Devyani, they weren't free from their lustful desires still, right? So here's Devyani, who's still a very young, lustful woman, who still has her own desires to enjoy. And here's Yayāti, who's in an old body, but still having the desires of a youthful body. And so Shukracharya is like, okay, you know what? I gave you this curse, but I'll also give you this benediction that you can swap your old age for somebody's youth. If somebody is willing to take on your old age and to take on your invalidity, you can have their youth. And this is actually, I think, one of the most, Prabhupada doesn't really expand on it in this purport itself, for this section of the chapter, but he talks about it a lot in the chapter as well. But it's a very important point for us to think about and reflect on, right? How much harm is there in engaging in a bit of sense gratification, in a little bit of Maya, right? We think, okay, what's the big deal? I'm engaging a bit. There's nothing wrong. Everybody needs a bit of enjoyment here and there. But we see that actually our engagement is nothing more than these lustful attachments and desires that we have. Because we want to enjoy. It's not that we're engaging in them because we have to engage in them. We actually want to enjoy. Even if we can't, we want to enjoy. And the problem is that if one is too attached to that sense gratification, then one becomes mad to gratify their senses. You see so many people who become addicts of certain things. They just can't let go. Even if they know they shouldn't perform an activity, they just can't stop doing it. But there's only one way that this attachment can be curbed, right? This attachment to material desires. And that's by looking and focusing at Krishna consciousness. The idea is that we should engage ourselves in whatever way we can in some service, right? The journey itself consists of this idea of divrena bhakti, right? Engaging in intense bhakti, intense devotional service, regardless of our desires, right? So even if we have material desires, the idea is that, okay, you accept that you have them. You don't pretend like you don't have the desires, but you engage in service because the service will purify us. There's a nice verse in Canto 2. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradhi divrena bhakti yogena yajite purusham param. This is Canto 2, chapter 3, verse 10. Translation: a person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. Right? So regardless of what stage of bhakti we are at, the idea is that we always engage as much as we can in bhakti. If we're just starting off and we think, okay, we're serious and sincere that we want to make devotional life our life. In one of the first lectures I had heard when I came into ISKCON, actually, I don't remember much about the class or the speaker, but I just remember that there was this prominent point throughout, and I think I might have shared it before. Do we want to make Krishna consciousness our life, or do we want to make Krishna consciousness a part of our life? The two are very different things. A part of our life means, okay, bhakti is there, you know, I've got my 16 rounds, I'm doing a bit of reading here, I'm doing a bit of listening, I'm doing a bit of service. But then I'll also go enjoy the holidays, I'll also go, you know, down to the pubs or whatever. I don't drink, you know, I'm a devotee, I don't drink, but I'll engage in all these enjoyous activities. Why? Because I want to enjoy my senses. But bhakti is there also, you know, do a bit of bhakti and a bit of enjoyment. But making Krishna consciousness our life is a totally different ballgame, because it means that we're making Krishna our priority in everything we do. Or at least we're endeavoring to do that. Not all of us are at the stage that we can just, okay, you know what? I've enjoyed material life enough. I've done the chewing of the chewed. There's nothing in it. I'm just going to fully focus on Krishna now. Nothing but focusing on whatever is there for bhakti, direct devotional service. Not many of us can do that. Many of us also have our swadharmas to fulfill. But the idea is that wherever in our bhakti we are, whatever stage we're at, we try and do more. We try and push ourselves to absorb ourselves more and more in service, because the service purifies us. We might have so many material desires, so many lustful thoughts, so many lustful desires. It might not be sex life. It might be having a big bank balance. It might be having a big position at work. It might be that my society people all know me, love me, think of me. All of this is counted as lustful desires because it's about gratifying our senses. But wherever we're at, even if we have all of these desires, If you're not doing service, start some service. If you're doing service, try and find more service. Try and engage more of our time, more of our energy, more of our thoughts in service. And service here means Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaran, all the nine limbs of bhakti. It's not just service in the temple. Service means also Nam Seva is service. Chanting the holy names is service. Bhagavatam Seva, reading the scriptures is service. Vaishnava Seva, right? Serving the devotees, helping the devotees out is also service. So we have to engage ourselves more and more, and the more we absorb ourselves, the more we progress, like Dhruva Maharaj progressed in life, right? If you remember the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, it's not that he started his devotional life or his devotional practice with the mood of, I want Krishna. He started off going, I want a kingdom bigger than Brahma. But as he performed service more and more, as he got deeper and deeper in his own process of bhakti that Narad Muni had given him, that process, what happened? When Narayan came in front of him, all my desires were like broken pieces of glass. Because his desires got purified in the process. The only thing that is required is that we're strong and determined, that we want to grow in this way, right? That we want to make Krishna consciousness our life, not just a part of our life. Because to be honest with you, most pious Hindus will say, yeah, Krishna is my life. Bhagwan is my life. I'm always thinking of Bhagwan. But they're thinking of Bhagwan when they go to the pubs and have a pint. They're thinking of Bhagwan when they're going to the clubs and enjoying a dance. They're thinking of Bhagwan when they're in distress and they're thinking, why did this happen to me? If they were really thinking of God so much, then a lot of the activities they wouldn't be doing. And actually, they'd go to God's words when they're in distress. When they're going through something, they'd be thinking, I'm going through this, but I know Krishna has a plan. Let me try and understand what Krishna says about this sort of situation. And those who are advanced, who are learned, it doesn't even affect them. They're like, okay, this happened. Okay. Don't get disturbed in happiness or distress. They're not disturbed because they know that whatever has happened is part of Krishna's bigger plan. There's nothing more to think about it. We endeavored for something, didn't work out. Was Krishna trying to teach me? Learn that. Rest is history. That's what the advanced devotees can do. Right? So we just have to have a strong determination, a resolute purpose. Vyavasayatmika buddhi, right? One pointed in resolution that we want to make Krishna consciousness our life and endeavor for it as much as we can with whatever efforts, with whatever energy we have. We won't always be able to be Krishna conscious today, right now. But if from moment to moment we endeavor, I want Krishna consciousness to be my life, let me try and engage in something that is Krishna conscious. Then 6 months later, 1 year later, you'll look back and think, I used to watch that Star Plus series from 7 to 9 every day, and now I don't even want to watch 5 minutes of it. We'll see that transformation happen within us. So, coming back to the story, right? So Yayāti is here incomplete in his lustful desires, but he's granted this benediction. He's granted this guarantee, this warranty, right? That you can swap your old age for somebody else's youth. Now Yayāti has 5 sons now, right? So he had two sons from Devyani and 3 sons from Sharmishta. So naturally, what's the first thing that you do? Okay, you go to somebody close who you think might be able to give you, what you want. So Yayāti approaches his sons in turn, hoping that they'll exchange. They're my children. They'll understand. They'll give me what I ask for. He clearly hasn't seen children of this day and age, because you can ask children whatever you want to ask them, they will never give it to you. So first he approaches the eldest son, And who is the eldest son? Yadu. Yadu. Now those who are thinking about my point near the start of the class where we were talking about there's something special about the dynasty of the moon, hopefully this Yadu name will start ringing alarm bells in the mind now, right? And also I'll give a second hint. We're approaching the end of Canto 9 and there's a Canto 10 that's about to appear, just to give it away. So he asks Yadu, right? I mean, you're my eldest son. You're very pious, you're very religious. Swap your youth for my old age. I'm not done with my desires, so, please do this for me. But what does Yadu reply? Yes, Papa, everything you say. No. He says, sorry, I can't. He refused the order, the request from his father. Isn't that irreligious? We just have to look at a couple of chapters ago with Lord Ram. He went through so much turmoil because he was listening to his father. But he was following dharma. He was following the religious principle that whatever the father says, the son must follow. And here's Yadu doing the complete opposite. Fathers ask something? No, sorry, I can't. But then Yadu explains that actually the reason why he can't is actually very, very profound. He says that one can't attain the stage of renunciation without having enjoyed material happiness first. If you don't enjoy something, you can't renounce it. And then you're left in this limbo state that you've kind of pseudo-renounced something that you haven't actually renounced. I remember when I was in school, my chemistry teacher, and I was mentioning, I wasn't Krishna conscious or anything like then, but I just had a very pious life. And I was like, I've never smoked, I've never drunk, right, by that age. And he was like, but why? Like, how do you know you're not going to like it? Because you can only decide to abstain from something if you know what it's like from engaging in it. And I was saying, actually, it's a very, very true point, right? Like, you can't be artificially renounced. You have to go through the motion to then renounce it properly. Unless you're a very advanced in consciousness, then you just see others going through whatever they're going through and like, that's not for me. That's what a lot of brahmacharis who stay brahmachari are like, because they're like, I see all these householders, that's not for me. But then you also have pseudo renunciates who are being brahmacharis in or outside the ashram, but actually they're not fully convinced that they belong in the brahmachari ashram. They're thinking, okay, what would happen if I had a family? So on and so forth. So Yadu is trying to explain that his no is actually religious. And when we look at in one sense, the gradations of religion, then we understand that actually what Yadu was doing was actually the higher principle of religion. There's one principle of religion, which is that you follow the order of your superior, especially father and mother. But higher than that principle is the idea that you want to engage in devotional service. That principle of devotional service should be kept intact at the expense of that principle of following the superiors. And we have a very good example of this in Bali Maharaj and Shukracharya, actually, right? Bali Maharaj, Supreme Personality of Godhead, came in front of Bali Maharaj and was like, give me 3 steps of land. Shukracharya is like, don't listen to him. He's Vishnu. And Bali Maharaj is like, which is why I should do it. Shukracharya was taking him away from devotional service. Bali Maharaj was like, I'll separate myself from you because you're taking me away from the higher principle, which is devotional service. And so Yadu actually said no based on the correct understanding of the ultimate goal of life, which is to renounce material enjoyment and simultaneously engage in devotional service. So Yadu said no based on principle, based on religious principles. So then Yayati is going, okay, fine, fair enough. Let me go to my next children. So then he goes to the next 3 sons actually. Durvasu, Druhu, and Anu. And these boys also go, no. But their no was not based on religious principles. Their no was based on their ignorance actually. The ignorant desire to enjoy their youth. Not because they wanted to enjoy the youth to renounce it, but they actually thought that nitya buddhaya, right? They actually thought that would be internally youthful. They felt that I'm young today, I'll always be young and I'll always be able to enjoy. So why would I give my youth to you? That means I can never enjoy again. But if I keep my youth, I can always enjoy. So they were fools, right? Thinking that they would live forever and enjoy their youthful life forever. But all of us on this age know that the body that we had 5 years ago, even yesterday, is different to the body today. So these 3 sons also said no, but this time they said no based on irreligion. So then finally Yati approaches his youngest son, Buru. And Buru agrees to the proposal actually, right? And he gives a very nice, in a couple of verses, he gives a very nice explanation, an elaborate explanation on why he should say yes, because of his indebtedness towards his father, which is based on religious principles. In one of the purports, Prabhupada quotes is from the Prema Vivarta actually originally, but I believe it's also just part of a Bengali poem in general, which Prema Vivarta is. Janame janame sabe pita mata paya Krishna Guru nahi mile bhaja hariye. Right? So translation is, everyone gets a father and mother, but if one gets the benediction of Krishna and Guru, he can conquer material nature and return home back to Godhead. In every life we get a father and mother, isn't it? Even if we had a life of a dog still has a father and mother. If we have a life of a hog also has a father and mother. A cat, a snake, a bird, every living entity has a father and a mother. But what is special about the human form of life is if we can get Guru and Krishna. We have the opportunity to get Guru and Krishna. And this is what Buru was expressing his indebtedness for. That through Yayati being the father, I was able to get this. Number one, I was able to get the human form of life. So that's one form of appreciation and indebtedness. But the second was that Buru was actually able to learn the higher principles of human form of life. He was born in a very pious family in one sense. He was born in a very religious family. Maybe we could go as far as saying that he was born in a very Vaishnav family in one sense. And so he was expressing his indebtedness for this opportunity. And then we read about how Yayati has taken Buru's youth and is now enjoying the kingdom. He's enjoying the opulence, he's enjoying the position as the king, and he's also enjoying with his wife Devayani, right? Just how he originally wanted to. But Yayati is also engaging in religious principles, performing sacrifices, charity, worship to the Lord, and so many things. And in the last 2 verses of the chapter, we find that Yayati is actually going through all of this externally, right? The enjoyment with Devyani, the enjoyment of the king, is doing all this externally, but internally, he's not satisfied. Externally, he's reached the height of material enjoyment. He has everything he wanted now, right? He had to go through a tribulation of the curse, but then he got a benediction, and now he's got his youthful body again, and now he's able to enjoy for many, many years. Externally, he's reached the height of material life that many people aspire for, but internally he's feeling empty still. He's unsatisfied. Why and how, we find out in the next chapter. Next week. Stay tuned. But yeah, I'll end there. Almost 5. So yeah, any questions, comments, corrections? Okay. See one comment from Rachana Mataji in chat. Higher taste. Yes, we get a higher taste. The more we engage in service, the more we get a higher taste of spirituality. So Bharata Prabhu was asking, how does the exchange process work? Isn't aging a natural process? We have heard Markandeya Rishi also stopped aging. Yeah, so one thing we have to realize is, yes, it's a natural process, but these are great rishis, these are great mystics, right? Shukracharya is a great Brahmana who has complete knowledge of all the Vedic literature. And don't forget, aging is a material part of life, right? It's not a spiritual aspect. Spiritually, we don't age. But materially, our body goes through a transformation day in, day out. So what these rishis, what these great munis can do is that they can use the Vedic sciences that they've learnt to manipulate material life. And one of those manipulations means that they can stop the aging process of the body. Rachana Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So do you want to reveal that thing that you were talking about in the beginning?
I'll let you reveal it.
Okay, so our great Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, the one who's bent in three places, he's crooked in three ways, and one of the crooked ways that he's crooked is that he is born in the Yadu dynasty, and he's the son of so he's born in the Yadu dynasty, and the Yadu is the son of Devyani, who's the daughter of Shukracharya, the demon's guru. Like, he's the demon's guru, and so that is very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And that goes to show how prominent a personality Yadu is, right? Oftentimes we go through various parts of the Bhagavatam and we're thinking, like, how does this relate to Krishna? How does this relate to Bhagavan? We're just going through a pastime that seems very material, but there's something to learn from it. But we see the Bhagavatam is always leading up to the next personality, right? The next incarnation, if we call it, of God. And in this case, we're leading up to Krishna himself. We don't do this in the Bhagavad Pravesh, but if you get to the end of Canto 9, the chapters at the end, it's like, what are we doing going through all these personalities, just verse after verse, just going through name after name after name? And it's like, who are these people? But then we realize that, hold on, these are all great personalities because they're all part of the Yadu dynasty that we're talking about. They're all part of Krishna's family. So there must be great personalities because they have Krishna in that lineage. Like, imagine, even today, when some people claim, I mean, now we won't see it this way, but when people claim that, oh, Arjun was my great ancestor, or Krishna, I'm a descendant of Krishna, I'm a descendant of Bhrigu Muni, or people have like Vedavyas in their surname or so on. Previously we might have thought like, wow, they're in this lineage. But now we know, okay, being part of the lineage doesn't necessarily mean all that much. Well, one thing is whether it's true or not, but it doesn't mean that much unless you're practicing what that lineage does, right? Like Vyasa as a surname often refers to those who are Brahminical, who are Brahmanas, because they would have studied the scriptures, right? Chaturvyas, Trivyas and so on. Sorry, Trivedi and so on. But you ask somebody with a surname of Trivedi today, have they studied the scriptures? Have they studied the Vedas? The answer is probably no, unless they're still living in India with a cultural Brahmana background. So yeah, Yadu is a very prominent personality, and it shows that him saying no, part of the reason was because he wanted Krishna's appearance to not be delayed. Because if he said yes, that means he wouldn't have got married until much later, which meant that he wouldn't have children until much later, which meant that Krishna's appearance would have to be much later. But Yadu was a Vaishnav. He couldn't wait for the personality of Godhead. So he's like, sorry, I can't listen to you, Father, because Krishna needs to appear sooner. So yes, Sarika Mataji.
Prabhuji, how justified is it for King Yayati to ask his sons for their youth? Like we did speak of the, dharma of the sons to follow the father's orders. And also, that's my first question. And my second question is that, of course, King Yayati enjoyed for thousands of years, but he wasn't satisfied. He actually never lived the curse. So when somebody lives a curse, they have Atmaglani, they go through why they were cursed, and probably they mend their ways, follow more Vaishnava ways if they are not following. So I don't know what comes in the next chapter. So maybe there is a suspense there. But does he, so because you say that it's one of your favorite pastimes, share something with us about King Yayati, because I'm not very impressed with his personality, frankly.
I said the pastime is my favorite, not that Yayati is my favorite. So I'm just muting you because there's an echo, so it just echoes. But okay, pastime. What I like about pastime, I'll save for next week because I requested Bristol the Prabhu that I can do the whole pastime. So you have to tolerate me for next week as well. But in terms of the first question, which is, was it like justified? I don't know, to be honest, right? But we can see it one way, which is that the children are part and parcel of the father. So in one sense, you could argue that you're right? When in one sense, you could argue that Yayati, if he lived through the curse, maybe he would have had this divigyan and, he would have realized, okay, all this material enjoyment was not worth it. But even today, if you look at somebody, or even maybe ourselves, right? There's this one thing that we really are attached to, that we just keep going back to. And if you artificially remove it, intellectually you might know, okay, it makes sense. But in the heart, you're still hankering for it. Even after many years, you hanker for it because you haven't properly let it go. And this is thousands of years of enjoyment that he's been through before. So then having it stripped away in a second and then living life, like, we don't know what would have happened, right? But don't forget, this is also Bhagavatam, right? So the reason, like, on a separate layer, we can understand that the reason why he got this benediction, the reason why he goes through the children, is one, glorifying Yadu. Because in this position, we don't really hear about Yadu beforehand, right? And even afterwards, I don't recall us really talking about Yadu until Krishna comes into the picture in Canto 10. But here we get the first feel of Yadu, like he's a very principled, he's very dharmic by nature. But he understands the essence of dharma, which is devotional service. But if this pastime didn't happen and we get to Canto 10, then it's like, okay, it's part of the Yadu dynasty, but what's so special about being part of the Yadu dynasty? We don't understand it. Then there's also this is why, okay, I'm kind of hinting, but this is also a second part, which is that you compare Yadu to the other three children. They both said no. Externally, they gave the same no. But the internal reasoning was different. As devotees living in the outside world, we do many of the same things that the karmis do, right? We go to work. We have a family. We go shopping. We do so many things for the family. But the internal mood is different. We're trying to adopt a mood like Yadu. that it's for Krishna. We might not be there yet, but we're internally trying to cultivate that mood that this is for Krishna. But the karmis have the mood of the other three sons. I want to enjoy because we live once. What more is there to life? And then Puru also gets glorified. Being the youngest, he turns out to be the most intellectual in one sense, because he understands the principle of religion. Age does not matter. We argue, oh, at least when I was a kid, I used to get this a lot, like, I'm older than you, so you should listen to me. I know more than you. I've seen more Diwalis than you. But that doesn't necessarily have to be true. Look at the three older brothers. And yet Puru was the youngest, but he turned out to be the most well understood of Dharma when it came to his father. And then, okay, I have to share this one now. So the verse that Bharat Prabhu got me to work on last year was 9:18:44. 9:18 verse 44. Uttamaschintitam kuryat pruktakari tu madhyama addhamoshadaya kuryat akarto charitam pituhu. So in the verses when Puru is explaining to his father about how he should have listened to his father, right? He says this verse, Uttamaschintitam kuryat, right? He's saying that actually a son should understand what the father wants and act before the father says anything. He should just understand the heart of the father. That's a first-class son. Uttamaschintitam kuryat proktakari tu madhyama. Proktakari means by listening to the father. The father says one thing, you listen. You're like happy to follow that order, follow the instruction. So you're a second-class son because you couldn't do it by just understanding the father, but you did it because the father told you to do it. A third-class son is one who irreverently follows the order. A son who follows the order but doesn't really want to. Think of that typical scene, maybe you've experienced this, maybe you've heard of others, where you've come home late from work, you're tired, you're thirsty, your child's playing a video game or watching TV and you're like, please get me some water. You're tired, so you want to just sit down and relax. Child's like, no, get it yourself. And like, please, get it for me. I'm telling you, I'm your mother, I'm your father, get it for me. And then eventually they go get it, but they do it stubbornly, right? Like, here's your glass of water, or whatever. They do it stubbornly because they don't want to do it, but they do it because they're told to do it. But then it's described that the worst son is one who doesn't listen to the father. Such a son is considered to be like the father's stool. When we think about, and this gets a bit grotesque, so apologies, but it explains the analogy well. When you think about the urination or like procreation, right? It comes from the same organ, right? In one sense, okay, if you're a biologist or scientist, then ignore what happens inside the body, but it comes from the same part of the body. But what's the difference? A child is meant to be useful, meant to do things in life, but the urine is just waste. Now, if the child isn't doing what the father wants the child to do, then it's like considered that the child is just like waste, just like the urine or just like the stool. Useless, basically, right? So this is in context talking about a father and a son. But the very nice thing about this verse, replace son with disciple and father with guru. A first-class disciple is one who understands the heart of the guru and serves accordingly. A second class is a disciple who listens to the instructions of the guru and endeavors to follow them. A third-class disciple is one who hears the instructions of the guru but doesn't want to act on them because they have their own way of thinking. But they do it because, my guru said this and I'll feel guilty if I don't follow it. But the worst type of disciple is one who has a guru but doesn't follow anything the Guru's saying. If the Guru's told them to do something, no. So there's multiple layers just in this one verse of this chapter, and think about all the different layers that you can get from the whole pastime. So that's, yeah. Anyway, I know we digressed from the whole original question, but yeah.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai. Hare Krishna. Motivation. So Rachna Mataji is asking, was Puru a better son than Yadu? Better son, yes, in one sense. But Yadu's focus was on being a better devotee. Arguably, you could say that Yadu's decision also gave benediction to Yayati, because he made sure that, like we have the pastime of Nrsimhadev and Prahlad Maharaj, right? Where Prahlad Maharaj says that, or I can't remember who says this actually, but in that chapter we hear that 27 generations or something like that, 21 generations get liberated when there's a Vaishnav in the family. So in one sense you could argue that Yadu was better, because by being a devotee, by focusing on his devotional life, he gave Yayati that benediction that he could be liberated. But then arguably you could say that Puru was better, because Puru listened to the father. So it depends on what vision you have as well, actually. If you look at the immediate vision, Puru was a better child because he listened to the father. But if you look at the longer vision, then you could argue whether Puru or Yadu were better, because Puru also led Yayati to the next chapter. Puru's decision of saying yes led Yayati to the next chapter. But Yadu's decision led to Krishna, right? As Rachna Mataji spoiled for the whole group. I told her not to, you heard me say no, but she just wanted to tell everyone, I'm joking. Hemi Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, so very beautiful class, actually very interesting. I just, on a little bit of a practical note, like you did discuss, like, perfection of life with Nityam Bhagavat Sevya, Sadhu Sangha and devotees and Nam Seva and everything. So, I mean, realistically, I live in this material world, materialistic life. So lately I kind of question myself, like, I have friends, obviously, not all devotees. So, there are days, not very many anymore, where I do have to go out with them. Still staying vegetarian and everything. But so are we slowly move away from these people, or lead them to Krishna consciousness? I don't know. I took my book, I gave her a book as well, and she accepted it, which was nice and kind of made me feel like kind of better this outing. But if you're your question, which was very very nice, your question, like you quoted from one of your lectures, like we want this to be part of our life or our life. So what should we be doing? Like you can't quit everything, like you said, and suppress everything what you want to do, your desires, and become Krishna conscious. It's not going to work. So which is the middle path, or you have to jump to the other side? Yes. So how do you do that?
Jay, nice question. So how do we, I guess if I put it in a different way, how do we associate with the world when we're trying to live in the world but not of the world, right? With all the friends that we have, with all the personalities that we meet, with the jobs that we have, and so on. One thing that we have to realize is that being spiritual doesn't mean that we're aloof from everything else that goes on around us, right? So the friend circles that we're a part of them for a reason, because at some point in time, we connected with them. We had the same tastes, we had the same likings. Oftentimes when somebody makes a drastic change in their life, especially when it comes to a spiritual sort of thing, your friends get tested, right? Your friendship gets tested, because there'll be some people who you called friends and they're like, no, what you're doing is wrong, don't go there, come down to the pubs, do this, that, and the other. They discourage you from the path you want to take. Very quickly, you realize that those aren't the friends that I want to be with. Those aren't my friends, actually, because friends, what do friends do? They encourage, right? They appreciate the difference and they encourage that difference. Even if they don't feel like that's what they want to do, they encourage you on your path. Then there'll be friends that are like, yeah, what you're doing is fine, but this is our friendship, you know, ours is different. And then you've got other friends who are like, oh, you're doing this, tell me more, right? And then they also get slowly into it. So realistically speaking, those who we consider friends but who are discouraging us, very naturally you will step away from them because you realize that they're pulling your consciousness down and you don't want that. Yeah, Subhara Prabhu, NY verse 2. But then we've got those friends who like what you're doing, but they're not so interested in it themselves. And now this is where a phrase comes in where we give association, but we don't take association. Right? That's one thing. Well, the idea is like what you're already doing, which is very, very nice, is that you're trying to give them some sort of higher taste. You're trying to elevate the consciousness. Sometimes it might be through giving Prabhupada's book. Sometimes it might be inviting them to a program. But other times it might be a bit subtle. It might be that, okay, maybe when you're in that friendship group, you're going to a restaurant as your normal thing. Maybe you're like, you know what? Let's not go to a restaurant. Let's have some home cooked food. It's nice. It's much more sattvic its nature. It's much more healthy. It's much better. You know, and we can connect whilst we're cooking. We can cook together. We can connect nicely. Or you could also raise it like, okay, maybe they're going through a tough time and you're just talking about it as naturally friends do. Then you can be like, okay, like, yeah, what they did was bad, but think about this, you know. You can elevate their consciousness by making them think on higher principles, on more positive thoughts instead of succumbing to their own thoughts as well. So like this, we give our association instead of taking their association. Taking association or giving association means what energy are we giving or taking? Are we taking negative energy from them and also coming down to their level? Or are we just trying to give the Vaishnav with thinking, okay, what would Krishna want me to do in this situation? How would Krishna want me to interact? And we're giving them that love, that care, that compassion, that association in that way. That's one aspect. Now, the second aspect, which I'm going to it's a bit strong, but I'm going to give it because Maharaj had given, Kadambakanda Maharaj had given this in one of his final sort of talks, I guess, last couple of months. Materialists can talk about 5 minutes about Krishna for us because of the relationship, and 55 minutes about all sorts of nonsense. Isn't it? When we're around family who aren't Krishna conscious, friends who aren't Krishna conscious, just out of the relationship, they might be happy to speak about something related to spirituality. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but then their urge is that they just want to go back to speaking about what's happening, the gossip that's happening, the news. You know, like I was saying, small minds talk about people, average minds talk about events. So they go down into that sort of mood again. But as we grow more and more in Krishna consciousness, we start seeing that we can talk 5 minutes about all the other nonsense, but we need 55 minutes to talk about Krishna. I mean, just look at this class. It's like over an hour since I've spoken. It's like, I feel like I've only just started speaking about Krishna, you know? That happens to all of us. Because once we get a higher taste for Krishna, we don't want to go back to the lower taste because we don't have the lower taste to the same extent anymore. And so that's where we navigate the relationship carefully, because that's where we realize that our real family, our real friends are devotees. And that's not something to be scared about, right? Because your friendships are still there. But in life, are you still as close as you were to your childhood friends from like when you were 5, 6 years old? Most likely not. maybe one person, right? If you're very, very fortunate. But if you see that one person, they're close friends to you because you still have the same likings, you still have the same tendencies. What tends to happen is that we want to hold on to our friendship groups before Krishna consciousness because we think like, I don't want my Krishna consciousness to take me away from my friends. But life takes us away from friends in the process. When we grow older, our school friends slowly start to distance themselves because now we have college friends. College friends, as we get work, slowly go away because we have work friends. Work friends slowly go away because we live in a society with a family and our family becomes our focus. So life's natural progression is that people were there before and slowly, slowly they will move away. But when we think of Krishna consciousness, when we think of spirituality, that becomes a focus for us because we're like, is Krishna taking us away? It's not. It's just a natural progression. Our likings have become more Vaishnava-esque. Therefore, we want to associate with those who are more Vaishnava. And those who aren't practicing Vaishnavism, we start relating to them less. So naturally, you're going to distance a bit more. Not artificially, but naturally. Because you want to be in the association of people more. Yeah, as Rashtramatarji mentioned, the greatest fear in life is change. Workplace is the biggest place where you have the fear of change. Nobody wants to change the way they work. We've always done it this way. It's the biggest danger of life. So yeah, an elaborate explanation, but I hope that answers Himi Mataji. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Prabhuji. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Jay, and yes, change is inevitable regardless of what we do. Okay, 12 minutes left. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, I think I have 2 questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. It was wonderful class, Prabhuji. I'm just elaborating on that relationship, you're talking about the friends and everything. Okay, it's fine with friends, but what about the family? It's a bigger challenge, actually.
That's why you leave country. No, I'm joking. No, I'm joking. No, of course, the idea is still there. Like with family, you can't deassociate yourself, right? Like unlike friends, where as you grow in life, you change your friends. Family, I mean, you're connected because of a different reason. You're not connected because you like each other. You're connected because you've been put into that situation, to that same blood, right? But that's where the idea, then you have to focus more on giving association instead of taking association. So yeah, with family, we can't deassociate ourselves completely. But even then, we might see that, okay, before we used to go to every single event that family used to put, or the birthday parties, or maybe you used to have weekly gatherings. But then you're like, okay, we used to do this, but, if I go to the weekly gathering, then what about my weekly sanghas? So then slowly you naturally just start reducing, and it's okay in my opinion. Like family will have a different view to it. But you see, even with family, what one generation does as a family, the second generation kind of adheres to. But then the third generation is totally different. Because as time goes on, the way the family functions also changes.
Yeah.
So we want to be there for the family. We want to give them love. We want to, continue having that loving, close relationship to whatever degree we desire. But the idea is that when we're in that association, we want to give them association, not take association. There's so currently the temple president of Bhaktivedanta Manor in London is Vishaka Mataji, but before her was Shruti Dhamma Prabhu, and he left his body because of cancer and so on. But he was a very, very loved personality. But what was interesting, I didn't know this, but what was interesting is that many devotees would invite him to like events or like weddings and so on. And weddings would take place at the manor sometimes. But you know what was special? He would go to the wedding for like 5-10 minutes. And the couple who were getting married, they felt so much love from Shruti Dhamma Prabhu that, wow, he came, he attended the wedding, he gave us so much love, affection, spent time with us. And this is a wedding that, I mean, Indian weddings last for, okay, in India they last for days, right? But in the UK, a couple of hours. But he only came for like 5-10 minutes, max maybe 15 minutes, you know? That too at the time where the wedding's over and everybody's going to greet the couple, offer their congrats and so on. But just think, like, this is quality of the relationship. It's not the quantity of the time spent. And that's what we should aim for. Aiming for quality, building quality in our relationships instead of time in the relationship. Time is important, but the more we invest in the quality, the less the time will make a difference in a negative way.
That's
Bhagavatam.
nice. Thank you, Lord.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu.
So, thank you very much, Prabhu. An excellent class with very practical wisdom, practical realization. It's always wonderful to hear to your class. So my question is, this is kind of a segue from Heavy Mataji asked. One is the material friends, and even within the spiritual organization, even if you come onto ISKCON platform, there are people who speak 5 minutes of Krishna, 50 minutes they talk of something. So there are still set of people, I'm not saying or fault finding or something like that. How do we kind of move away, and how do we guard against people who speak only Krishna for 5 minutes and talk rest of the things about 50 minutes, even in the ISKCON world of ISKCON?
Yeah, no, thank you, Prabhu. It's a reality of life, right? So you're not fault finding at all, in my opinion. I think you're just stating a fact, right? But this is where we have to understand it. Again, if you go back to NOI, there's this idea of Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama Adhikaris, right? We have to see that, firstly, we should appreciate that they're part of the process, yeah? So we shouldn't take them away from that. The fact that they've come to Krishna in some way, shape, or form, they're on that journey. But to the degree that we are invested in making Krishna our life, to that degree, we need to find the association that we fit with. Because you're deassociating yourself from one group of people within ISKCON doesn't mean that they're bad people, doesn't mean that you're looking at them down or looking down on them. But you're seeing that you don't fit in with the relationship that they're developing with Krishna or at the stage that they're at in their development. But we can give them that love, we can give them that encouragement to grow in their path, right? But we have to find those who are like-minded, who we associate with, who are encouraging us on that path as well, right? So that's kind of a high level. The other aspect also is that relationships, and this is something Kesha Maharaj would tell me, relationships in the spiritual sense function very much same from a material sense, right? Materially, when you go to school, right, you have hundreds of people in your batch. But how many of those hundreds of people do you actually connect with? I mean, you're all part of the same age group, you're all part of the same sort of classes, you're studying with the same teachers, in the same environment. Same way, ISKCON, all part of the same organization, all supposedly with the same goal, all doing similar services. But just like in school or in the workplace, you don't resonate with everybody. You have your own like friendship group. In ISKCON, it will be the same. In spiritual life, it's the same. You find those who you resonate with and associate with. But again, as you grow in your spiritual path as well, the same thing will happen. Like I was mentioning, I think to Himi Mataji's question as well, where as you grow in Krishna consciousness, you realize that, okay, I've got my friendship group in KC, but now I'm looking for something different. Now my tastes, my desire of growth is slightly different to theirs. It's not that they're wrong and I'm right. It's not that they're not growing and I'm growing, or they're not desiring to grow but I'm desiring to grow. It's that our journeys now start to go in different ways. Just like when we go from school to college, paths go different. So in the same way in spiritual life, if you're finding that you've got the same friendship group for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, even within ISKCON, then either one of two things. You both are growing very nicely together at similar paces, or one of you is holding on to the friendship and not growing at the same pace that you could grow. We shouldn't be afraid of changing friendship groups even within ISKCON. And a final thing on that, if you think about even if you think about even our gurus or acharyas or maharajas in ISKCON, right? Okay, you've got one layer which is Srila Prabhupada's disciples, right? I mean, those were all friends, friendly, etc. But then you've got, for example, the next layer down, right? The Srila Prabhupada's disciples who are Maharajas, Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj, Kadam Kanan Maharaj, so many others, right? Would they get to the stage of Maharaj? Why did they get to the stage of Maharaj and not everybody who was with them in the batch? Because they grew at different paces, and they also found that the association that they needed was different, and therefore their trajectory went in different directions. It's not that those who became grihastas fell down, right? I know there's this thing that, brahmacharis fall down when they enter married life. Their trajectory was different. Who do Maharajas associate more with? Those who they were friends with before, or those that now they're in this sannyas ashram that they now associate more with sannyasis? They still have all those people all those devotees that they associate with before, but you find that they spend more of their time, their association, with either those that are serving them or serving with them, or other sannyasis, because now their mood is purely about serving the mission. So change, as was mentioned, change is inevitable. Even within ISKCON, even within our spiritual circles, we grow through different friendship groups, just as our friends will grow through different friendship groups. Yes. Any other points, questions? No? Okay, I'm conscious of time. Okay. I think we'll end there. I had two questions. One of them, Sarika Mataji somehow made me answer anyway. But I'll put the questions in chat anyway. Maybe you can think about it afterwards. And if you're inspired, feel free to message each other. I don't know if you have a separate group that you can message on. But yeah, or you can message me if you're inspired to share your thoughts. That'd be nice. But I'm just conscious of time, and I don't want to. And I'll always overrun. So yeah. So the first question: discuss and compare the marriage between Devayani and Yayāti with that of modern marriages. So we briefly touched on it, but just something to think about, something to bring the Bhagavatam into perspective of modern life. And the second, which Sarika Mataji somehow weeded out of me, SB 9, 1844, in context is in relation to the relationship between a father and son. What other meaning can be derived from the verse allegorically? Right. So yeah, I've already given one very common perspective, but maybe you come up with something else. Maybe you come up with another sort of analogy for it. But yeah, I'll end there unless anybody has any final questions, comments, thoughts.
Hare Krishna. Are you taking the next class also? It's next Sunday?
Yes, because we're continuing with the pastime, and I requested Brother Sundar Prabhu, like, please don't take me away from this pastime. So he was merciful.
It's very nice, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. I think somebody else wanted to speak.
Yes, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. So as you would be taking the next session as well, so combinedly this session and next session, we can have this, like what can be the takeaway points from these two chapters?
Yeah, good idea. Good idea.
Thank you.
You can Yeah, so the devotees, Sima Mataji has given everybody homework to read up on the chapter again and think about it, comment on it, make sure you have your thoughts ready. So don't blame me, blame Sima Mataji for that, yeah? Back in school now, homework. But yeah. Jai, thank you everybody. We shall meet next week. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Krishna,
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo.
Vaishnavebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Prabhupada
Namo.
ki Jai.
Jai.
Bhagavad Pravesh ki Jai.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.